Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Bersatu President Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin is set to announce Perikatan Nasional as an official entity this Merdeka Day, with Datuk Seri Azmin Ali set to be named its information chief. However, today it was reported that MIC has withdrawn its application to join Perikatan Nasional. So initially, MIC had agreed to join Perikatan because they were under the impression that Barisan Nasional will be joining the pact. But since UMNO has said that it will not be joining Perikatan, MIC has since decided to withdraw. Now, this latest development has raised some questions about the identity and the structure of the multiple coalitions that are emerging.
Indeed, Melissa, of course, we have real shifts and some lack of clarity. Let's take, for example, Bersatu's much heralded decision to go multiracial and multi-religious, only to have some sort of backpedal on that in terms of what and how the party might accommodate non-Malay Muslims.
Right.
Which, of course, then also has implications for the coalition called Muafakat Nasional.
Right, okay.
And on and on and on.
So we have right now Perikatan Nasional, Bersatu PAS and Parti Solidariti Tanah Airku STAR in Sabah. And then we have, I guess, Bersatu in... PAS in Muafakat Nasional and also in Perikatan Nasional, and then we have Bersatu in Perikatan Nasional, but also being accepted in Muafakat Nasional, right?
And PAS, because it's not in Barisan Nasional, which remains, it's kind of rump Barisan Nasional, meaning it's not the 13-party coalition it used to be. It's now a much reduced coalition. Whatever it is, it seems to be a lot of jostling, a lot of moving, and that's fascinating. I think a lot of political scientists are watching all these things. Let's get back to the MIC. MIC's decision not to enter into Perikatan Nasional because, as they put it, this was the party president saying, and I quote, Abang UMNO, meaning, Big Brother UMNO, was not going to go into Perikatan Nasional. Very interesting, because I think, Melissa, it also, reminds us of the fact of internal party dynamics. Barisan Nasional, of course, when it formed and as it existed towards the end of its run until 2018, was dominated by UMNO.
Right.
With a lot of the parties, including MICs, being junior partners. I think that language kind of reaffirms that idea that somehow all the smaller parties are junior parties.
So although we have certain parties saying they don't want to formally join a coalition, there is still some kind of a loose coalition, right, working together. And I think that's what's interesting, this emerging cooperation within coalitions, whether or not when it comes to the general elections, there will be competing priorities. Will there be jostling for seat negotiations? And how will that affect seat negotiations when it comes to coalitions that are, in fact, overlapping?
Right. And, many countries have, coalition governments that are formed only after the elections. Here we've had, in recent times, electoral pacts that preceded the elections. But you're absolutely right. There's a kind of fluidity, and that fluidity has, in fact, been given a boost. It's almost like steroids, this fluidity.
Is this just the nature of, democratic coalition politics?
Yes, I think, that it can be said and can be read that way, and I think our political scientists are reading it that way, the increased fluidity. But the question, of course, is what are the implications of that fluidity, in terms of the stability of government. Let's talk about the horse trading. Obviously, there's going to be more and more horse trading if you have multiple coalitions, aligning with other coalitions. GPS in Sarawak is itself a coalition.
Right.
It has implications for the size of cabinet. If cabinet positions are seen as a reward for the participating members' parties, right? There's also the question of whether, as a consequence of that, you can have technocratic or maybe that's not the word you want to use, competent governance, right? Can you have a government formed by people who are actually good for that job?
Right. Okay. Well, let's keep a close eye on this. I'm sure political analysts will be weighing in on this matter as it develops. But in other news today, the Electoral Reform Committee has submitted 49 recommendations to Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. This is the ERC chairman, Abdul Rashid Abdul Rahim. He said that there is no time frame set for the government to implement these recommendations on electoral reform. However, he reckons that, if the government wanted to, 32 out of the 49 recommendations can in fact be implemented within 3 years. The other 17 may take between 5 to 10 years to actually put in place. But all of that, of course, is contingent on the fact that the government's willingness to adopt these recommendations in the first place, whether they will want to.
Yeah, well, ERC was developed under Pakatan Harapan. It's a kind of legacy, of that previous administration. Now we're looking at a post-Pakatan Harapan government. Do they have a manifesto? Do they have a reform agenda? We've talked about this several times. Abdul Rashid, of course, is a Bersatu member. He recently lost positions within the party. But if you remember, he was also, Melissa, a civil servant who long headed the Election Commission. Right. And we now seem to have reverted back to that practice of putting civil servants in that position with the recent appointment of the new EC chairman. Absolutely.
I very quickly want to point to the recommendations, among the recommendations made. So apparently some of the recommendations were to separate the functions of the Election Commission into 3 bodies. So the EC will remain in charge of enforcing election laws. There should be an election secretariat to kind of conduct the election process, and then a commission for redelineation. So a specific commission to look at matters of electoral boundaries. And I thought that was quite interesting. So, these are the reforms that they were championing, but whether or not the Perikatan Nasional Government will want to look to reform the electoral system.
Yeah, it's another big question. And so again, a lot of work done in the 22 years was, of course, Dr. Mahathir's administration, first iteration of Dr. Mahathir government. The 22 months, right, all this consultation and deliberation by a lot of experts now, in the form of recommendations. Perhaps it will have to wait for a government that's interested in actually changing the terms of our democratic system. But I must say, Melissa, at this very point, this seems to be almost academic now, right? The question now is the Sabah state elections and the call for remote voting as a concrete step towards, giving Sabahans a real voice in their own state elections.
Well, there is an immediate concern when it comes to electoral reform. The immediate concern is how is the electoral system going to adjust to accommodate the new realities of living in a time of a pandemic, where, in the time of limited travel and physical distancing. Thomas Fan from Bersih we had on the show recently who said, the idea of remote voting, for instance, in the Sabah elections, having voting centres here in the peninsula for Sabahans who are outside of the territory.
Yeah, and that was
long-standing idea.
Yes, long-standing. Meaning it was raised years ago, before the pandemic, and and what were the realities then? The realities were a lot of Sabahans who work here can't afford the time and the money of returning home. So why didn't these reforms take place 8 years ago, when I believe it was Maximus Onkili who mentioned, or mooted this idea? So if I remember correctly, the point really is, do we really want full participation in our election system? I mean, that must be, and what is the benchmark, right? And what are the problems do we see in our existing system that need to be corrected? That's what reform and a reform agenda would look like.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. But after this, we'll be taking a closer look at the newly tabled Independent Police Conduct Commission bill. Does it sufficiently answer the question of who should police the police? That's all coming up in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
COVID-19 is still on. It is our responsibility to adhere to all the regulations set by our Ministry of Health. We are in the era of a new norm. Face masks, social distancing, and also hand hygiene are just basics. We can do this together, and let's not take it easy.
COVID-19 is still out there. Let's do our part in following the SOPs in place so that we can break the transmission. Follow the 3 C's. Avoid closed conversations, avoid crowded spaces, and avoid confined spaces. We can beat this together.
The war on COVID-19 is not over. We should not take this lightly. Let us ensure all steps are taken to avoid the spread of the virus, be it social distancing, hand hygiene and wearing of the face mask. It's a new norm. Let's not slack.
Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. With me is Sharad Kutan. The debate on the new Independent Police Conduct Commission Bill, or the IPCC, has been postponed to the next Day 1 Rakyat session. Now, the new IPCC bill replaces the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission Bill. That's the old IPCMC bill that was tabled by the Pakatan Harapan government last year. Now, despite the debate being postponed, the new IPCC bill has already attracted criticism from various quarters. They claim that this new version has been significantly watered down compared to the previous iteration. Joining us on the line now to discuss this further, we have Ding Joanne, advisor for the Centre for Independent Journalism. She was previously participated in stakeholder meetings for the IPCMC consultative process. Good evening, Joanne. Welcome to the show. Now, what were your first impressions of this newly tabled Independent Police Conduct Commission Bill?
I'm afraid my impressions were not good at all. This bill seriously weakens oversight over police conduct instead of strengthens it. In fact, what is being proposed, the commission that's being proposed, is significantly weaker than what we already have, the Enforcement Agency Integrity Commission, or the EAIC. Now, the IPCMC bill that was proposed by the previous government was meant to strengthen the powers of an independent commission for police oversight. And one of the main things that it would have done was have been, after it makes a finding of misconduct, it would have had the power to set up a disciplinary board consisting of IPCMC members and a member of the police force and police force commission to make a disciplinary finding to suspend or to dismiss or to reprimand. And that was always something that was missing in the EAIC process, that after they produce, even an excellent report detailing, falsification of records or excessive use of force, all they can do is recommend. And often then it just disappears and we have no idea then what goes on behind closed doors amongst the police. So the IPCMC was meant to address that. But all those disciplinary functions have been taken out of this new IPCC bill. So it can again only recommend. Even if it makes a finding of misconduct, it can only recommend. And on top of that, this IPCC has even less powers than the EAIC. Its purview is smaller, and there are many instances where the police can actually refuse to answer questions based on national security or national interest, or because it would tend to incriminate themselves or open themselves up to criminal charge. And all that is actually not in the EAIC. EAIC actually compels them to answer questions, and EAIC actually has more powers. So this is not even an EAIC plus. It is an EAIC minus. It is going backwards to pre-EAIC, and it gives us less than what we currently have. So my first impression upon reading this bill is, what really is the point of this bill?
Well, this is very interesting, Joanne, because, as you said, it's kind of EAIC minus. The government seems not wanting to further the process of turning this into legislation. It's postponed the second and third readings. But tell us a little bit more about the IPCMC, since you were involved in it. What happened there? How did we get from the EAIC and the assumptions underscoring that particular initiative to the IPCMC? What was it that had to be kind of overcome in terms of building trust between the police and non-police stakeholders in this process of finding a sweet spot for police reform?
Yeah, so the consultation process was really commendable. It was done by the GIACC together with, which is the Governance, Integrity and Anti-Corruption Commission, together with Dr. V.K. Liu's department, and they worked really hard, and they consulted everybody. They consulted the police, they consulted retired police officers, civil society, the Bar Council, MPs, and they held many, many meetings. And it was really the first time that we were listening to each other, you know, and there were good police officers that were part of this process that genuinely had wanted to set up, you know, an independent body, but also had genuine concerns about, you know, would it have too much power, you know, would it then have complete oversight over the police, would everything fall under this commission? And we listened to their concerns, for, you know, many of us for the first time, and I think they listened to our concerns as well. We are not concerned about controlling everything that the police do, but we really want an independent commission that can weed out the bad apples, you know, that the ones that are blackening their name, you know, that something serious is done, a process that is transparent and accountable. So it felt like we were moving towards a common ground. So, for example, this disciplinary board that the IPCMC bill was meant to set up, it wouldn't comprise solely IPCMC members. You know, it wouldn't be completely 5 different, you know, complete outsiders making a decision over whether to suspend or reprimand a police officer. You know, through that process, you know, it was agreed that no, for the investigation, that can be a completely independent process. But when it comes to discipline, a police force member should be part of that disciplinary board, together with a police force commission member, and together with a few IPCMC members, then come to a decision. So I think the result of that was, you know, a compromise. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but they say, you know, the signs of a good compromise is that everyone is a little bit dissatisfied. And I think that was where we were headed with this bill, and it was maybe a good start, something that we could work with and hopefully improve upon as the IPCMC was set up and started to sit and hear cases and make decisions and move towards something that we all could believe in, both the public and civil society as well as the police and the government. And that was the hope for that bill.
Okay, so Joanne, now where does this new IPCC bill, where does that leave us in the journey to police the police?
I believe that we must completely reject this bill because if not, we are going backwards. Like I said, it is an EAIC minus. But we have seen through the process that it is possible to have an open and honest dialogue and come to a compromise on the IPCMC. And there are those in government and in the police force who are willing to work together with public stakeholders, civil society, to Bar Council to deal seriously and accountably with misconduct in the police force. And we have come so close. So it is really not that time to give up now. And even if they don't want that IPCMC bill that was previously proposed, I mean, the world is changing and Malaysia has changed, and people do not accept anymore this top-down government knows best. And, you know, we are not going to tell you anything, you know. We know everything and you don't have to know anything. That's not how the world of Malaysia works anymore. So even if the police don't want an IPCMC, then they must be prepared to open up their disciplinary processes. They must allow independent people to sit on their disciplinary inquiries, for their processes to be open and transparent so that the public can judge for themselves whether justice has been done in cases where findings of misconduct have been made. So I hope that we will continue to all, you know, communicate with each other, listen to each other, and come up with something that we can all live with. And whatever it is not the model that is currently being proposed, because this model only creates more suspicion that the police have something to hide and that they need extra protection to keep things secret. And in the long run, that's not good for them either. It doesn't instill public trust or public confidence in them. And I hope that, you know, they understand that this is not in their interest as well. It is in their interest to have something set up that is accountable, that is transparent, that we can all believe in. And I believe we can still continue to work towards that.
Joanne, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight and sharing your insights. We really appreciate your time. Now we're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but we'll be back with more, so stay tuned.
To adhere to all the regulations set by our Ministry of Health. We are in the era of a new norm. Face masks, social distancing, and also hand hygiene are just basics. We can do this together, and let's not take it easy.
COVID-19 is still out there. Let's do our part in following the SOPs in place so that we can break the transmission. Follow the 3 C's. Avoid close conversations, avoid crowded spaces, and avoid confined spaces. We can beat this together.
The war on COVID-19 is not over. We should not take this lightly. Let us ensure all steps are taken to avoid the spread of the virus, be it social distancing, hand hygiene, and wearing of the face mask. It's a new norm. Let's not slack. We can do this.
Hi, thanks for staying with Sharad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation about the newly tabled Independent Police Conduct Commission Bill. We have joining us on the line now Maria Chin Abdullah. She's the PKR MP for Petaling Jaya. Maria, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, the Perikatan Nasional Government had already said back in March that it planned to recall the IPCMC bill, so we knew its withdrawal was coming. But did you anticipate that the IPCC bill would replace it?
The IPCC bill was meant to replace the IPCMC, which was quite watered down during the 2019. But it was supposed to be a big improvement because 2019, the Parliamentary Select Committee was particularly set up, first time ever, under the Pakatan Harapan government. We set up a Parliamentary Select Committee to actually have a thorough feedback on the IPCMC, and we did that, and it was led by YB Ramkapal, and they went through the whole country talking to a lot of people, and they gave them the feedback. So we were actually looking forward to a much amended bill. But when I saw this IPCC, it was totally not what I expected.
Maria, is there a kind of bipartisan conversation going on about this bill, considering that it's a kind of political hot potato, and there are voices that say this is anti-police and so on and so forth? Do you believe that there is in fact a robust bipartisan support for police reform?
Bipartisan consultation took place, definitely. Yeah, and especially when the Select Committee was set up, there was a lot of conversation going around across the party. We understand that at that time, the present government, then was the opposition, was actually very critical of it. So that's why the Parliamentary Select Committee was set up, to actually try to understand further what were the key constraints and key concerns of the police. And those were actually taken into consideration, and the report was supposed to be discussed, and the bill, which was a much amended one, was supposed to be discussed on the 3rd reading.
Right. So the debate on this new IPCC bill has been postponed. It's been postponed to the next Dewan Rakyat session. Do you know why it was postponed, Maria?
Well, the minister did not even bother to give us a reason why he postponed it. He says that it is at their discretion to postpone it. We weren't even able to even ask for a reason.
Maria, is it possible for police reform to get bipartisan support? Is it not just with the consultative process, but in some sort of a negotiation over what would be good for the country? Is bipartisan and a bipartisan approach even thinkable in this current political climate?
I think it's possible. You see, the heading Independent Police Conduct Commission is actually a compromise, because initially it was called misconduct, police misconduct and so forth. So the title itself bring forth to say that, you know, it is about the police conduct, which appeared to be more palatable, apparently. But there were also other clauses that were included to allow the police to actually have a right to reply, to actually talk about their welfare. So those things were actually included. Yeah. So, but if you look at this new IPCC 2020, it doesn't actually say anything about the welfare of the police, nor even touch on the fact that, you know, there's a need to raise awareness about the welfare of the police.
Maria, when we talk about police reform, this is a conversation that's been going on for such a long time, and I'm wondering if you think that the police has a lot of political power here in Malaysia.
Well, they have a lot of say. Yeah, when this bill IPCMC was brought up, the police was the key resistance, but also the political parties, because I felt that, you know, they didn't quite understand what the IPCMC entails, because it is not just about police abuse of power or police misconduct. Yeah, built in, if you remember, there was a Royal Commission of Inquiry. And that Royal Commission of Inquiry actually was very comprehensive, very sensitive to the needs of the police, included their housing needs, their social welfare needs, their education, the children, and everything else. So those good values and all that were actually supposed to be captured into the IPCMC. But along the way, the welfare of the police got kind of lost, and somehow rather the police abuse and death in custody became primary. I think both of these topics need to have equal weightage and needs attention of the government as well. So therefore, it was actually debated in the last year that the welfare of the police and even more allocation needs to be put to the police to take care of the barracks, which is looking like slums, and so forth. So those things were actually in the conversation, and therefore I feel that, you know, this present government must bring back all those values and the conversation and the concern for the police welfare back
Maria,
into
we have just about half a minute left. I want to ask you very quickly if you think that, you know, there's a divide between people who think checks and balances need to be put in place on police powers and those who say that the police are sufficient to police themselves. They don't need external, they don't need, I mean, I don't know where the independent in this particular bill is or what independent oversight there is. I mean, is there a philosophical divide?
I think that you need to have an independent body for the check and balance, because looking at all the cases that we are getting, we are not getting any answers from those who have disappeared, those who have actually died. So I think that this body is necessary, but it has to work with the police. And if you look at the revised IPCMC, that kind of check and balance, the working together with the police, including the IGP into the committee, all these actually take into consideration the feelings of the police, so that they don't feel that, you know, external people are trying to impose things into it. And so therefore, I think that, you know, those kind of conversation needs to be talked about.
Maria, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We appreciate your time. Unfortunately, that's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Good night, folks.